Hey, Kay. Good to see you. We're heading to Cleveland from west of Toledo to do a job. I'm bringing the pug puppy with me. Here he is. Greg, how are we? Sleeping. He's sleeping. Got his bed too, but I think that'll be fine what he's got now. Just brought the bed in case he wants to ride in the seat for a while. It's a long, couple hour drive. Say long. Not long for a truck driver. It's like Russell Brand just went live. I'm probably going to get that going.
Those generations would lose those constitutional rights. And I watched during the pandemic, really in shock, all of the Bill of Rights, with the exception of the Second Amendment, being assaulted. I saw first they came after freedom of speech and freedom of expression. They began censoring me openly, and many other people, just doctors.
I don't think we're going to be able to stay on YouTube for very much longer, because I just feel that your tendency is towards free speech and potentially antithetical to the WHO guidelines. So I'm going to say let's move over onto Rumble now, because look, before we go, this is the question that I want you to answer. Look, you've already said that you feel that the CIA murdered your uncle John F. Kennedy. If you, some of us feel like, well, was JFK the hero believing to be in the culture, or was he part of the system? How can anybody get into the position of the president without being co-opted by the very forces you describe, the malign intentions that you have outlined in your previous answer?
Happy Friday!
Into that position. And if indeed you maintain that, your father, and of course I expect that you will claim that your father and your uncle were legitimate, virtuous, then you must presumably believe that the reason that they lost their lives is connected to those values and principles, and it's simply not possible for you to answer that question on YouTube. I also recognise that you are going after, as far as I can see, the most significant opponents of freedom: the military-industrial complex, the big pharmaceutical industry and the incredible power they're able to exert over mainstream politics, and the control over the mainstream media. And I think if you're going to attack those kind of interests, you cannot do it on a WHO regulated site like YouTube. So click on the link in the description. Join us now on Rumble, where some of those questions as well. And if you're watching us on Locals right now, post your questions in the chat. I'll be asking Robert some of those questions as well. So Robert, what do you feel about that sort of rather broad and potentially incendiary, and I hope not offensive, question I was asking about the family members who most of us believe were murdered by the CIA?
Yeah, I mean, came into office, he had been a military, he had been a skipper of a PT boat during World War II. He had the enlisted man's scout, although, he was a low-level officer. He had the enlisted, but he had a kind of an independence. He had his own ship that, and was destroyed by a Japanese destroyer, but he had the enlisted man's skepticism of the upper brass. And when he came into office, the guys who were running the Joint Chiefs at that time, Louis Lemonster, and the other ones were people who we knew, who we had known as, whose names he knew as an enlisted man, and who many people respected, but he was skeptical of them. And when he came into office, he already, the guys who were running the Joint Chiefs at that time, Louis Lemonster, and the other ones were people who we knew, who we had known as, whose names he knew as an enlisted man, and who many people respected, but he was skeptical of them. from the beginning. And he also was very conscious of Eisenhower 3 days before his inauguration, which I attended as a little boy in Washington. Eisenhower gave one of the, what we now should regard as probably the most important speech in American history on January 17th, which was my birthday when I was 6 years old, warning Americans about the emergence of a military-industrial complex that would corrode and devour our democracy from within and without, the institutions of our democracy.
It's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's on.
Turn America into an imperium abroad and a security state at home. And Eisenhower warned specifically also when he defined military-industrial complex, he included the federal scientific.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Russell Brand.
It's a really fascinating speech in that way. My uncle was very aware of that. 2 months in, he's surrounded by people. Of course, nobody.
On the road again. We're heading to Cleveland. 2-hour drive.
And nobody knew about it. They had,
I got the puppy with me though.
Trained,
got some company.
Who intended to invade Cuba, but they waited. The Eisenhower-Nixon administration had waited to dump that project on the Kennedy.
Had him out back before we left, wearing him out. Watch that short I just uploaded at noon.
Was surrounded by an intelligence apparatus and his joint chiefs were saying, "You got to go do this." And my uncle said, "Wait a minute, why are we invading a sovereign nation and a little nation? We're going to look like bullies to the world." And I don't mind a Marxist country there, but that's their choice. This was before there was Russians there. So it was just a nation that had made a political choice in his view that we didn't like, but he also was very conscious of the abuses of the Batista administration that Castro had revolted against. And he later said that, sent a note to Castro saying that, they were saying, we're going to invade. And Jack said, I don't want any U.S. military involved. They intended originally to use military amphibious vehicles.
Well, what type of file format is it?
You're not going to use anything from the U.S. government. So the CIA.
If you're going to YouTube, it should be MP4, I think.
And they provided the ships for the.
I think there's the or .mov.
And of course, United
depending on what type of recording equipment you have.
Again, this kind of merger of state and corporate power that and Dulles had represented United Fruit.
Wow, just went live on Rumble.
Before he got the CIA jobs, with all this kind of incestuous stuff that continues to infect and dictate policy of the CIA. But
Edge.
They said, listen.
That's your browser.
Are you sure this is going to work? Are these guys just going to die there? And they said, no, as soon as they land, we've done all the intelligence. There's going to be a public uprising against Castro, and he's going to, and the public will depose him, and these guys are going to be heroes. And Jack was very skeptical, didn't want to do it, but they said, we've trained these guys, they're armed. If you keep them here in Miami and Louisiana and Texas, it's going to be a nightmare. You got to let them do this. But Jack let them go. They get to the beach, and all of his joint chiefs come to him. His Alan Dulles and said, they're dying on the beach. You got to give them air cover. And Jack said, no, I told you there was going to be no U.S. military involvement. And those guys, some of them died on the beach. The rest were captured by Castro. Jack came out of that meeting, and he said to his aide, I want to take the CIA, shatter it into 1,000 pieces, and scatter it to the winds. Then he fired Charlie Cabell, and he fired Richard Bissell, the 3 top guys in the CIA, and he brought in somebody, John.
I'll be right back. I'm going to run in the store.
But the next 3 years, the next 1,000 days, before his death, were a constant battle with his military-industrial complex. And interestingly, Russell, he realized in the middle of his presidency that Khrushchev was in the exact same position as he was. Khrushchev had fought in World War II, had been at the Battle of Stalingrad, had seen the horror of war, did not want to go to war. But he was surrounded by military hawks and intelligence apparatus that did want to go to war. And my father got a letter one day, a private letter that was smuggled to him by a KGB spy and a GRU spy, called Georgy Bolshakoi. And Georgy Bolshakoi was a guy who came to our house all the time. We loved him. We knew this was when James Bond movies were coming out. And, you know, me and my, at that time, there were 8 or 9 or 10 of us, my siblings. We all knew, you know, we knew about what a spy was, and we were very excited that this guy was actually a KGB spy, and he was very entertaining. He could do that, you know, Russian Cossack dancing, and he would do rope climbing contests with my father and push-up contests, and he was kind of a really a fun guy, always laughing, very loud, singing, all this stuff. Oh, he became friends with my father and mother, despite the anger at the State Department for letting a KGB guy into our house. Khrushchev began smuggling private letters to my uncle through Bolshakoi. So he was trying to end run his military intelligence apparatus. And my uncle began this correspondence, 26 letters they wrote to each other. And they installed phone, you know, hotlines so they could talk to each other directly without talking to their apparatus. So in my brother's home, which used to be the Summer White House on Hyannisport, there's still wires sticking out of the wall. That was the red phone that we all knew when we were kids, that if we picked that up, Khrushchev would answer on the other line. And my uncle wanted to talk to him directly because he did not trust his intelligence agencies. And his intelligence agencies tried to get him to go into Laos. He said, you know, the communists would be a domino effect, and he refused. And he settled the Laotian War. They tried to get him to go into Vietnam to send combat troops, 250,000 combat troops. And it wasn't just the salad brass, as he called them, the top brass with all the salad on their uniforms, what he used to call them. It was it was people he trusted, like Maxwell Taylor and April Harriman and Dean Acheson and all these people who were kind of the graybeards, and they were all telling me, you got to send 250,000 people in, or the communists are going to take over Vietnam, and then they're going to take over Cambodia, and then it's going to be Los Angeles. You know, they're going to be at our door. And my uncle was like, that's their war. They got to fight it. We can help them a little, like the French helped us during the Revolution, but we cannot fight their war for them. And so, before he died, he ended up sending 16,000 military advisors.
All right.
That was fewer people, fewer troops, than he sent to Jackson, Mississippi. He had one black man, James Meredith, into Ole Miss. He sent more federal troops there than he sent to Vietnam. The troops he sent were not combat troops. They were military advisors, mainly Green Beret, and they were technically, under the rules of engagement, not allowed to participate in combat. He didn't want any combat troops. A week before he went to Dallas, he heard that some of his troops had been killed over there, and he asked for a casualty list. And his aide brought him a casualty list that 75 Americans had died in Vietnam. And he said, that's too many. And I want them all home. He signed that day a national security order, ordering all the troops out of Vietnam, all military advisors out of Vietnam by the end of 1965, with the first 1,000 home the next month. This is the end of November. It was one of the first thousands shipped home by the end of December. This shocked the military. And then he went to Dallas, and he was killed. But, you know, my uncle used to say, Ed Bradley, his best friend, asked him, what do you want on your gravestone? And he said, he kept the peace. He said, the primary job of a president of the United States is to keep our country out of war. That is the primary job.
Yeah.
And he succeeded in doing
Amazing.
that. But no president since him has.
Wow. Bobby, how can you say, though, that it's beyond reasonable doubt that it was the CIA, just because of because he sacked some high-ups, because he was gonna dismantle it, or at least he had an intention to, because he was at odds with the military-industrial complex? And if that is true, do you suspect that in other high-profile assassinations there's a comparable structure behind it, including obviously the assassination of and also that if this is, you know, sort of 70 years ago or whatever, how how entrenched are those 50? How entrenched are those deep state interests now?
You guys get a chance to see the short yet?
With the current conflicts,
Ivar and Garmi playing tug of war.
Yeah, do you not feel that this is, when you have access to sort of like this kind of personal information, do you not feel that this is an indefatigable enemy, that this is an unstoppable machine? I mean, like in this country, when like Jeremy Corbyn, like, you know, got a little bit of traction, like the media just shut that dude down. I mean, he couldn't get arrested. Like, so, like, how can you talk out, speak out openly against these kind of interests, let alone try and mobilise a political movement and stand against them without serious fear of, assassination?
Let me answer the first one. Why do I say that the case against the CIA in terms of the assassination of my uncle is beyond a reasonable doubt? The answer to that would take us to get information that is so voluminous at this point. There are more than 1 million documents, including all the documents that show that Lee Harvey Oswald, that they recently released, which we already knew, but it came as a shock to the United States because the president never reports it. And Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset. Americans didn't know that. Certainly the Warren Commission didn't know that, and Dulles made sure that they didn't know it. He was recruited when he was at the Abasui Air Force Base in Japan. He was a Marine radar operator who was in charge of the U-2 flights, and then he defected to the Soviet Union. It was a fake defection that was organized by James Jesus Angleton, who was the director of counterintelligence at the CIA. And it was directed to uncover a mole at Langley. They knew they had a mole at, and that mole, incidentally, was never caught, but that mole did tremendous damage to U.S. national interest. And one of the things that mole did is it allowed the CIA believed that the U-2 flights were CIA, they weren't Air Force. And the U-2, the CIA believed that when Khrushchev shot down one of the U-2s in May of 1960, right before the election, where Gary Francis Powers was the pilot, that U-2 flight was shot down. The Russians were able to do that because of information that were passed on to the Russians by the mole. They got Lee Harvey Oswald's defect to do this very, very loud fake defection that was covered in all the papers then. So it was a U.S. Marine walking into the American embassy and denouncing his citizenship and saying he wanted to be a citizen of Russia. So he does all that. And then what they thought is when he did that the Russians would be very worried about who is this guy. And they sent a message to their mole saying, get us his file. And they had a trigger system on his file, so anybody who touched it, they know that that was the mole. But nobody actually went in and touched it. And so 2 years later, they brought him back. And he, in this weird situation, Lee Harvey Oswald goes back to the U.S. Embassy from which he's defected and says, I want my passport back, and they give it to him, and can I borrow $600?
I indoctrinated
airplane ticket. They send him to Dallas, where he's picked up at the airport by George Morenschott, who's a CIA asset, and then, who gets him the job as a book depository, among many, many other things. But we know everything about what Lee Harvey Oswald was doing at that period and before and after. We know his constant interaction with the handler.
Check out the short I just published.
David Hadley Phillips. I've talked to Cuban assassins who
I got the puppy with me.
Who saw Lee Harvey Oswald.
Why are we going so fucking slow here?
In September, October of 1963, with Lee Harvey Oswald. But Lee Harvey Oswald then this, somebody did a fake defection of him to attempted defection to Cuba. We know so much about it, including confessions of many of the people who were involved in the assassination, deathbed confessions.
You can't hear him growling, but it's hilarious. So you'll be able to hear him. I'll be able to turn the volume up.
If you ever, or anybody who's listening to this, want to read probably encyclopedic material and is a really rigorous scholar. Jim Douglas, and he wrote a book called the Unstable Document, but it's very highly circumstantial. And I'll get to that in a second, but I will tell you this one thing. When I was, I guess I was almost 10 years old when my uncle was killed. And I was standing in the White House, in the foyer of the White House with my aunt Jackie Kennedy and my mother and my father. My uncle's body was in the East Room, and there was a time when we were waking him. And Lyndon Johnson comes in and tells my parents that Lee Harvey Oswald just been shot and killed. And that the man who did it was a guy called Jack Ruby. And I said to my mom, I turned to my mom at that time and said, did he love our family? In other words, was Jack Ruby killing Lee Harvey Oswald because he was upset, about our family? And so at that point, like many Americans, was asking questions because this didn't look right. Lee Harvey Oswald was a gangster. He did not like my family. And Jack Ruby was a gangster who didn't like my family, who was, my father's initial reaction when his brother was killed, the first call that he made was to the CIA desk officer in Langley. And he said to him, did your people do this? Then he called up, the next call was Harry Ruiz, who was a Cuban refugee who I knew well, who was a constant fixture in our household. He had been at the Bay of Pigs, he had fought Castro, that turned on Castro and communism. He was a very close friend with Castro about all this stuff too. So, my father called Harry Ruiz and said to Harry Ruiz, did your people do this, meaning the Cubans? Because the Cubans at that time had turned on my family and hated them and felt they were traitors because they had not rescued him at the beach. And because they had ended the raids by Alpha 66 and the other groups that were raiding Cuba all the time. So the Cubans were very angry at my parents. My father thought, and they were all linked with the CIA. My father thought maybe that the CIA had done it, maybe using Cubans. And then the third conversation he had that morning, I had been brought home from Sidwell Friends School when my uncle was shot. And I arrived at the same time John McComb arrived at my house, who was the director of the CIA at that time. And my father brought him for a walk in the yard and said the same thing.
Enjoy the weather.
The CIA who did this.
Thanks for coming in on inDOCtriNATION.
My father's first instinct, which was a good instinct, it turns out, was that the CIA
be the person, albeit anecdotal, that the Kennedys were murdered by the CIA. Throughout this campaign, your name will be smeared, but I would like you to share with us, if you can, a little about how you feel the pandemic was used to assert control, profit the pharmaceutical industry, grant opportunity to regulate, introduce surveillance and measures that may otherwise have been resisted. What does the pandemic period tell us about power? And in the event that you became president, how would you address what's happened in the last couple of years?
I wrote a book about how the pandemic was misused and that it was not, the public health response was not about public health. It was a militarized and monetized response. It was a pretense for climbing down totalitarian controls. And the weird thing about the pandemic was this constant involvement by the CIA and by the intelligence agencies